This week on Dig Me Out, 80s Metal. With your hosts, Jason DZIAK, Tim MINNECI, and Chip Midnight.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dig Me Out, 80s Metal. Join us at Patreon to become a member of the Metal Union at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Gentlemen, this album was not selected by our union. We will have a union selection coming up. This one was selected by me. I am bringing you this episode.
You're the maniac.
I am. We've each picked an episode earlier in the year, and now we're doing it again. Previously, Jay picked Accept, our previous record. And then Chip, do you have a one lined up for us that we're going to be doing soon?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, you don't have to share it if you don't want to, but we're looking forward to it. I think we've got we've got a poll one coming up as well. We had a poll winner, and that'll be in the future as well. But for this episode, I got to tell you my history with this band and why I picked them. I discovered them on the internet a week ago, and I thought this would be a cool band to do.
So if you haven't listened to the episode before, Tim is the metal version, and Chip and I are 80s metalheads. So when he picks a record, it's always interesting to understand how the hell he came upon it.
And we should also let listeners know that we have a kind of a private chat amongst the three of us. And when Tim mentioned this album that we should start listening to, I truly did not believe that this was a real band. As I had,
the album cover does look like maybe you could generate that with AI. I'm not gonna lie.
It does. My previous pick was more mainstream. It was the Faster Pussycat self-titled record, which I was more familiar with. But literally, this one I was on a blog, a metal blog, where they had MP3s that you could sample, and I wanted to. So my reason for picking this was, and I will get to the actual name of the band and the album, was I wanted to do something thrash. Because that's probably as far as a lot of metal goes in the 90s, or excuse me, in the 80s, is like where I know the bands, but I don't know the albums. So I know Metallica, obviously. Metallica is the biggest one. I know Megadeth. I've listened to Megadeth albums. I know Anthrax, but I'm not as familiar with Anthrax as the other two. But we've done an Anthrax album on the regular Dig Me Out podcast. I just haven't gotten into their 80s stuff. And then the fourth being Slayer. And I've listened to Rain and Blood, and I think that's about it from Slayer. So what I wanted to do was find something that was thrash, which is what I used the blog for, but wasn't one of those four bands. I wanted to hear like, well, what's a different thrash band sound like? What was like the next gen of thrash? And so I found this band, and they're called Paradox, which again sounds like a band from a movie that, you know, Keanu Reeves was in the 80s.
It so does. That's awesome.
And the album I picked was Heresy. This is their second album. It's considered, according to the band and like the fans, as like their best record. And so the first record was I think 2 years before. So this came out in 1989, just at the end of the decade. And the first album came, Product of Imagination, that came out in 87. And then they had a long break because of lineup changes and people going different ways. And they didn't release their third record until 2000. But I picked this because I listened to literally 30 seconds of it and I went, oh yeah, this is what I want. This is exactly what I was looking for to explore thrash. And so that's it. Heresy by Paradox, released November 20th of 1989. So neither of you guys knew this
is
record,
really the
right?
spirit of Dig Me Out. I mean, you're just like, going through the milk crates and see something interesting, just pulling it out and dropping the needle.
Exactly. And I did, like I said, thrash to me is like one of the genres that it's so limited in terms of what I know. But I didn't want to do a Metallica record because that would be or any of the big four, to be quite honest. I wanted to do something like outside the mainstream. So let me give you guys a little bit of history on Paradox. Paradox formed in Würzburg, Germany in 1986 by two musicians, Charlie Steinhauer and Alex Blaha. They were in a cover band that did like Overkill and Venom and stuff like that from the early 80s on. And then in 86, they formed Paradox with Mark Spithe and Ronald Stahl. Spithe on guitar, Stahl on bass. Charlie Steiner, guitar player, lead singer. Alex Blaha, love that name, was the original drummer. He sadly passed away last year. So they get together in 86, start recording demos. And by 87, they've got a record deal with Roadrunner Records, and they release Product of Imagination. It did okay. It was very much an underground record in the United States, but they got some touring with like Exodus and Halloween, Overkill, did some just kind of like opening band type stuff. So then they go back into the studio, and there's, of course, lineup changes. For this record, bass player is Matthias Fries Schmidt. You still have Spithe on guitar, Steinhauer, who's still in the band. And spoiler alert, they have a new record coming out this year. He's the only original member, Charlie Steinhauer. And then Alex Blaha plays drums on this record. This was recorded with Harris Johns, who is like the thrash guru. Like, he's worked with Celtic Frost and Creator and Voivod and Sodom and Napalm and all of these like heavy bands. Gravedigger, even the names, like I'm just assuming from the names that they're heavy bands. I don't even know what
or they're monster trucks, one of the two.
Yes, that too. Like one of the bands is called Slime, Occult, Enthroned.
Monster trucks.
All monster trucks. Actually, that would be a fun game. Is it a monster truck or is it a German metal thrash band? Tankard.
Is this the lineup for Monster Jam or?
Yes. Exhumer, Daily Terror. These are great names. Anyway, so that he's obviously a very he had been working with those bands before this record, and they had him for this record. So he had a good producer. This was, like I mentioned, released in 1989, and then in 2007, it was released with the bonus tracks, which were 2 demos and then a live video CD. And then I believe they've also done a vinyl reissue, because Chip, I think you posted a picture when you were in a record store recently of this record, right?
Yeah, I saw it at Used Kids Records in Columbus about a week ago. I was shocked.
That must have been the reissue.
Yeah, it was.
What was it going for?
It was like $32.
Okay. I'm guessing it was probably an import, and that's why it was going for 32. Although honestly, 32 is kind of like the norm now for new releases, unfortunately. Yeah. It used to be like 20.
And I think, the other way that they get $32 is they call it like a limited release of 1,000 copies or something. And so they have to charge a little bit more to make up that cost if they're not mass producing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe you can get, it's also on like Bandcamp. You can order from there and stuff, and you can order the CD if you want. So the album that we're talking about, Heresy, is actually moved off the page, but so this is a concept album, and I love what this concept album is. It's a concept album about the Albigensian crusade of the 13th century, which I'm sure we're all familiar with.
That's awesome.
But I'll explain to you what this is. So it's also known as the Cathar Crusade of 1209 to 1229, which was a military and ideological campaign initiated by Pope Innocent III to eliminate Carthism in Languedoc, which is now southern France. Now, what is Carthism, you ask? Carthism, welcome to my TED Talk, by the way. So Carthism was a Christian or pseudo-Gnostic movement in southern Europe at this time, and it was also in northern Italy as well as southern France between the 12th and 14th century. It was denounced as a heretical sect by the Catholic Church because they believed that you had to be like you have to lay yourself before God and be very humble and live in poverty and those sorts of things. Catholic Church ain't really about that. Catholic Church likes that money.
What you're describing is Jesus.
Yes.
The Catholic Church wasn't down with that.
I also got to say, I got to say too, when I was in high school and I started listening to some thrash music, I remember like I didn't want to tell my mom that I was listening. Like she knew that I listened to whatever was on the radio, but not thrash music. And my impression at the time was like she would think that these are all just dumb guys who drink and smoke.
Right.
And these guys have quite the historians to write a concept album about this.
It's very
stuff.
Maiden.
It is.
Yeah.
And so
I'm sure this was one of the concepts that Steve Harris has in his notebook.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
He's eventually going to write an album about.
So the thing that was really controversial, is that the Cathars believed in two gods. They believed in God of heaven, and they believed, which is according to Corinthians 2 Corinthians 4:4, that there is an evil God, so like a devil essentially, and that there was a God of the New Testament, and then an evil God, which was Satan, who is master of the physical world. And they were when you talk about like the Inquisition that the church put on, this is who you're talking about, is the Cathars, who were prosecuted essentially during this time.
Okay.
And so when Pope Innocent came aboard and replaced the previous pope, he was like, we're gonna mess these people up. Like I've got it all. I'm all in on these people. And that's where the medieval Inquisition starts, is to eradicate Carthism, which it actually did. It completely eradicated Carthism. So there you go. There's your content for this album. So when you're looking at Crusader's Revenge and Massacre of the Cathars as the titles of the songs, now you know what they're talking about. Good luck actually like getting the lyrics as you're listening, because they go by pretty fast. But if you want to do research, you can obviously go to like Wikipedia and research more on the Cathars and this whole thing that happened. There have been a lot, like any traditional 80s metal band, there have been like 40 people in this band, and only one guy has been around the entire time. They, as I said, they broke up after this album, and then they got back together for Collision Course in 2000. And then they've been steadily putting out records. Electrify in 2008, Riot Squad in 2009, Tales of the Weird in 2012, Pangea. I got to imagine that Pangea has some like old school, continental drift stuff going on in that album. 2016, Heresy 2, End of a Legend. Yes, a sequel record came out in 2021, and then Mysterium comes out in this fall from this band. So that's the history.
What could the sequel possibly be about? If the Cathars were wiped out.
Revenge of the Cathars, like
but there's no revenge.
They're making a Gladiator 2, dude. I think they can make a Heresy 2. You know what I mean? You got Gladiator 2 with Denzel Washington.
Maybe the Cathars became the Illuminati, and they're slowly going to rise again. And
I love that. About. That's good. That's brilliant. I like that. I need to find that out. I haven't listened to that record, and
put that in Steve Harris's notebook.
Yeah, Steve Harris is he's got all the notes.
We need a Maiden album about this.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's pretty much the history of this band. And really it's Charlie Steinhauer is the driving force of the band these days. And he's another guy who just primarily plays flying V's, which I believe when we did the previous episode, wasn't the guitar player for Accept like a flying V guy, I think.
Yeah, Wolf Hoffman. Yes.
So 2 in a row for the flying V. It's a popular guitar.
The proper metal guitar.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into the record, shall we? Who wants to start with what worked? Or do you want me to start?
I can. It's your pick. Why don't you go first?
Okay. Yeah, I want to pick. Because I want to hear your reactions to this record. Okay, so one thing that worked for me, like I said, I wanted to do a thrash record, and this album delivered. It delivered on speed, it delivered on technicality and technical skills, it delivered on energy. I really, really love the guitar playing on this record. From the opening track, but I'll highlight a couple of songs. Killtime, which is the third track. The verses of Killtime are insane. The two guitar players are playing like 30-second notes when they are, which is so fast, and they are playing melodies on their guitar while singing, and it's the quickest strumming and singing at the same time. Like, I'm sure that there are other thrash bands that play like that. I have not heard that before, and my jaw was on the floor listening to that. There are so many cool riffs. I want to also point out Search for Perfection at the beginning and end has this like harmonized lead that happens that is so cool. I don't even know. There are so many times where I listen to it, headphones on, headphones off. I'm like, I don't understand what they're doing. So in actuality, when listening to this, I felt like when I listened to jazz, like I appreciate like listening to a jazz record, but I go, I don't really understand what's happening. I know it's good. I know there's like really interesting stuff happening, but if I would actually try to figure this out, I would be lost from the tempo changes, from the scales, from the everything that's happening. So, and I feel the same way. Like I kind of like let this wash over me in a lot of ways because it's so dense and there's so much happening that I can't really put my finger on what everything is. I don't even know if that part ever got repeated. Maybe it did, but who cares, because it was a really cool part.
I know what you're talking about. I wrote down that to me, it sounds like a 60s or 70s amusement park ride that is based on like UFOs. Like it almost sounds like an old school movie UFO sound. Like.
It's a clinic of guitar playing on this record. The solos are all over the place in terms of virtuosity and the speed, and it doesn't lose the groove. Like there's some grooves on this record, so that's what worked for me. The guitar playing is incredible, and I really love just like letting it play. And again, this is a vinyl record, so this is over in 40 something minutes. There is a in the expanded version, which I have the two bonus tracks, which is like a demo version of The Burning and a demo version of Massacre of the Cathars. So it's really just a 9-track album, and then plus there's acoustic guitar, which again is like beautiful, like picked acoustic guitar, perfect for this style, with this very heavy subject matter, and absolutely loved, like fully committed to the idea of what is happening here, and the sound, and I really, really liked it, even though I had like 30 seconds of exposure to it going in when I picked it. So that's some of the stuff that worked for me. Who would like to go next? Jay, Chip?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just build on what you said. This to me sounds like, I know a little bit more thrash than you do, not a ton, but this sounds like more of a thrash band that's leaning into like a progressive bass of the band. There's a lot of technical ability here, versus like a Metallica or an Anthrax, where I think like the bass of that band is more punkish, or can be, they and less not that they're not technically skilled, but this band is able to do like prog level stuff that I don't think you would hear Anthrax or Metallica do. I like that a lot because it just gives these breaks where they can do stuff like bring an acoustic guitar in that's classical, or when they go to some of the double kick burst stuff, instead of it being, I mean, because the double kick and the tempo is intense enough, right? And then they layer in, like in Killtime, those synced up guitars, so you just get this super heavy, intense sound. But what I like is like it's also the most melodic portion of the song, because the singer he pulls back, not screaming, they're not doing any like death metal vocals. It kind of sounds like James Hetfield like to me. The same thing in I think Serenity is another example. When they go to the double kick part in the pre-chorus, again, it's like it's actually a melodic break, which is interesting. They go from like this thrashy verse to this double kick to this halted kind of melodic pre-chorus. And I just like how they're able to play with rhythm a lot. They can go from like galloping to these blasts and in between. So you're just constantly, I felt like I was on a roller coaster. You know, you're just like strapped in for like the most intense roller coaster at Cedar Point. And like you're screaming and you're turning left and you don't know when it's going to end. And like, you know, it's up and down and then it goes slow. And you're like, you know, it's just a fun ride to buckle in for. And to reinforce, you know, the acoustic guitar stuff, it's not just even like the little class, and there's not a ton of it, right? There's a little, I think, an intro in one song and then a little outro thing. But then at the end of the record, they do this little ending piece, which is acoustic guitar, but it's these really strange jazz voicings. I don't know, the chords these are playing. They don't make any sense to my brain, but they're super cool. And they're not overdone. They're just like this little 1 or 2 minute long acoustic piece to kind of like end the record, but it's just weird enough that it also fits. You know, sometimes when bands like this do something acoustic, you're like, oh, this is too pretty. Like, I don't want you to be pretty. I want you to be like moody and weird. And that's what the acoustic stuff even is on this record. So that's some of what worked for me. How about you, Chip?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I had never heard of this band when Tim mentioned it. And so I had no preconceived notions going into it. Like Tim, the first 30 seconds, you get the acoustic guitar intro that gives way to sort of this Iron Maiden kind of majestic metal sound that goes into a thrash metal song, like all within the first 30, 45 seconds. I will say that I think I scrolled really maybe too quick, and this doesn't change the opinion of the record at all to me, but when I first listened to it, I thought it came out in 1984, and I was all getting ready to say like these guys were ahead of the game. The fact that it came out in 89, I went back and looked. So like this to me, because it was German, like if they had been from New York or LA, I would absolutely have this record in my collection. I would have had it in my collection in 1989. But I looked to see what else came out around that time. Anthrax Among the Living came out in 87. Testament's Practice What You Preach came out in 89. Metallica's Master of Puppets, 86. Slayer South of Heaven, 88. And to me, this fits in alongside of any of those. It is great. Sometimes with these episodes, I listen as homework, and then I'm happy to be done listening, and sometimes won't go back and listen to anything. Like I have out of choice listened to this record so many times in the last week. It is great. Like, and you know what's cool about like thrash metal is that's a genre to me that it's very tried and true. It's very, if you told me that this album came out 2 weeks ago, I would believe you. Like thrash metal doesn't change, doesn't follow trends, doesn't, you know, maybe the recording gear is better, but at its root, it's the same. Like there are very few bands that sound like Van Halen today. There are very few bands that sound like Poison today. Like everything evolves or changes or goes in and out of flavor. But thrash metal from the 80s to today, like I said, you could tell me this came out 2 weeks ago and I would 100% believe you. And I would say it was one of the best records that came out this year. So I don't think it sounds dated at all. Tim, I mean, I think you made an incredible pick, especially, you know, of a band that none of us had heard of a month ago. I love everything about it.
Yeah, Jay, I think your description of it being sort of like a roller coaster ride is a perfect example or perfect encapsulation, because when I listen to this record, there are moments like, I think a perfect example is in Massacre of the Cathars at like, I think it's like I forgot what it's like 2:45 into the record. It like sort of breaks down a little bit. It's not quiet, but it like the drums aren't playing, you know, the bump, 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 bump. They're just like kind of hitting like bump, dun, dun, bump. And then that guitar solo happens and he is absolutely going insane. And I'm like, that's when you're like going up the roller coaster, rolling up the roller coaster, and like, boom, you're dropping now. And oh my God, this is crazy. And like, we're twisting in corkscrews and like, it's just madness, is absolutely madness. And I love it because it's just so over the top. And it is exactly what this should be, which is just, we are putting on a clinic. the fact that, like you said, this still sounds so good, that it doesn't have any, like, I don't think it doesn't have any production issues with regards to, oh, it's too 80s or whatnot. I mean, it is just so raw and blistering that it's difficult for me to find fault with this, other than, when you compare it to like a Metallica, you go, well, Metallica has like a big chorus with like Master of Puppets, or you could look at Injustice for All, when they're, I mean, it's still the thrash record, but there's, Harvester of Sorrow on that record. That's like a slower track in comparison to, Ride the Lightning or what have you.
I don't know. There is a song on this album that reminds me of Harvester of Sorrow. I don't know which one it is, but I remember thinking that when I was listening to it.
Interesting.
It's 700 years on, maybe.
Maybe.
There are parts of that where it gets in like halftime-ish, where I could see that.
I think this falls very much in line with the early Anthrax stuff, kind of before State of Euphoria was kind of the one. State of Euphoria was like they had reached this point, and then they kind of went for the MTV, and like that was Anthrax's big jump into not mainstream, but a little bit more. They got a little bit less thrashing, a little bit more into the mainstream hard rock stuff. But man, I've mentioned this before, but I kind of like write little notes for each song, and I have Search for Perfection chorus sounds like Anthrax. I have Killtime Anthrax vocal delivery. I have Massacre of the Cathars, another favorite that sounds like Anthrax. 700 Years On, Anthrax style vocals with Slayerish guitars. Like it sounds very much a sibling of an Anthrax record, and not in a copycat sort of way, or not like in a cheapening Anthrax. Like I think, man, I would like in 1989 going back, seeing these guys in Anthrax on a bill together would have been amazing, I think.
Yeah, that pit would have been going crazy.
I was so big on just talking about the album and how much I love the whole thing, but I did also want to mention, you mentioned that it closes with Castle in the Wind, which is an acoustic. I think I clicked on Spotify, like the repeat, and it's a great, like if you listen on vinyl and you flip it over from side B to side A, like, and the side A starts with an acoustic guitar, like it's almost like this circle that doesn't end, right? Like if you play it on repeat, it's going to go from acoustic guitar back into the start of the album with acoustic guitar, and it's just like this nice full circle that you can continuously repeat. A lot of times bands do that, they put the acoustic slow thing at the end, but they don't have it maybe at the very beginning, and so like you kind of expect like, oh, this is pretty expected to have a slow acoustic song. But I like I said, because I had it on repeat, I didn't know. I was like, wait a minute, have I heard this song? Like I didn't know where I was in the record. It was which is great.
Yeah.
And they have there's acoustic at the end of The Burning, which I'm guessing that was like the A/B switch with The Burning, because it seems like you would like end out with that acoustic at the end of the first half, and then go to the like it's Massacre starts like so fast and so like quickly that I assume that that's where you pick up. But when I look at it on like time wise, I don't know, maybe The Burning was on the second half, because it's like 6 4 4 4. That's almost 18 19 minutes there. You're at like 22 minutes aside, and then it's 5 4 4 5 1. So maybe The Burning starts the second side on the vinyl version, but I'll have to look. As far as stuff that didn't work, I don't really have a lot. The only thing that I don't love is when they, like on Crusader's Revenge, that song has a lot of just the bump 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 bump, like that drum beat, whereas when they use it in other songs, because again they're going so fast, they just tend to have to, it tends to be in shorter chunks, and there tend to be like more things happening than just bump bump bump, like snare and kick at the same time, and cymbals. That one, it's like through the whole verse, and it wasn't quite as interesting to me in terms of like ranking the songs where I would put them. But that's sort of like a nitpick. I don't really have that, like it didn't make me skip the song, let's put it that way. It was just where I was like, okay, this sounds like more of a less developed, not developed, but like it just starts more standard thrash, as opposed to, like you mentioned, Jay, there's like a lot of like progressive elements. And so one thing I wanted to ask though is, where does the line between like thrash and then like power metal? I'm not sure where I know where power metal and thrash metal like meet or cross over, because it is listed as one of the genres on Wikipedia. You guys know?
Yeah, to me it would be, well, I don't know technically, but in my mind it would be, in power metal you're not going to hear like the double time drums as much, like a drum beat.
Okay.
You're gonna hear more powerful drumming in that way, like less like fast punk influence drumming. And I
Okay.
think a lot of that like 30-second note guitar stuff is going to be more thrash oriented than power metal. Power metal is going to be more like Judas Priest, where you're like, it's power chords, that are weightier and less about like being fast. So to me, thrash just comes down to speed. Like there's just a lot more emphasis on speed.
Well, then what's speed metal?
I don't know. Chip, do you have anything?
I would
I would
guess.
say speed metal's thrash.
Yeah, I think they're probably somewhat interchangeable. I'm not the musician. I have no idea. My guess, if I were to guess, would be maybe it's beats per minute. Maybe like speed metal is just overall faster.
Got it.
But I have no idea.
Chip, is there anything that doesn't work for you on the record?
Like you, like I'm hard pressed to say anything. I mean, nitpicky. Like I don't know that in 1989 this album cover would have jumped out to me. Nothing wrong with the music. I'm not sure that the album cover, but again, I don't know. I mean, in 1989, maybe it worked. I don't know. No, the things that I typically with music like this that I would have said didn't work would maybe be the songs were too long or the album had a couple too many songs. That's not the case here. Some of the early thrash stuff that I'm familiar with, vocals were angry or yelling or screaming or, like that. These vocals are great. Like the singer here is not going to go sing for Dokken tomorrow. He doesn't have or Rat or Poison. Like he doesn't have a pretty, pop metal voice, but his voice is great. Like the voice, I mean, the music itself is great. If he had just been screaming the entire time, like maybe I would have been like, yeah. I mean, Accept is a great example, right? Like I don't love Udo's vocals, and that kind of that didn't ruin Accept for me, but it made me not want to listen to them a whole lot. Like I think the vocals. So,
Yeah.
Long story short, no, there's nothing that doesn't work for me on this.
Okay. Jay, you? Anything?
I'll poo on the party a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Poo on the party. I think Tim, yeah, I'll poo in the part. I'll pull in the poo in the pool.
Pool in the pool.
I guess I would double down on where you were going, Tim. So to me, like the middle of the album, I start to get a lot of double time and drumming, and it becomes more straightforward thrash to me. So Crusaders, Revenge, The Burning, Massacre, that span starts to, it can almost be anybody to me. There's
That's
a little
funny.
less progressive, weird stuff going on. They're playing with. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say 2 out of the 3 songs I wrote down favorite song ? So.
Oh, okay. I don't dislike them. I just felt like as I got to the middle of the record, I was like, maybe this band isn't as unique. Like this could be Testament. This could be insert old Anthrax song, right? So I was just more, I think, attracted to the stuff that really stood out as like Killtime, Serenity, Search for Perfection, Heresy. To me, those songs were very different. Like it was a thrash band, but they had their own distinct sound. So the middle section got a little soft for me.
I agree with you. I think
on your question about the vinyl, Tim, the question on the vinyl, the B-side starts with The Burning.
Okay. In terms of my favorite songs, I agree with you. Like Search for Perfection and Killtime, they just have unique guitar parts that I had never heard before. And it happens again towards the end of the record too. And I think like that middle 3, it's not that they're not good songs. It just didn't have that unique rhythm part that was totally unexpected right up front. That was the thing that just caught me off guard, because I was like, I don't know what they're doing, and I'm pretty good at figuring out, like, oh well, that's just a lead, that's just a a little chromatic scale or something like that that's creating that. But I was genuinely like very confused as to, I would love to see how they play Killtime live and sing at the same time, because that seems insane to me. Like, it's hard enough to play guitar and sing at the same time, but to play quick strummed 30-second notes up and down the neck of the guitar and maintain a vocal melody is really, really difficult. And I want to check out a video if I can find one. So, but I'm with you. Like, some of the songs have a signature, I guess you'd say, guitar line that I go, oh, that's this song. Yes, this is the awesome lead here, or this is the crazy solo that blew my hair back.
I did not sample a ton of the other stuff because I like this one too much, and I was honestly a little bit afraid of listening to something and not liking it. I did listen to Heresy 2, just a couple songs, and I think the music is pretty close. His vocals sound different though.
Interesting.
Yeah,
it could be just age.
Yeah, but I didn't love the vocals on Heresy 2. They weren't bad, but it honestly, it didn't sound like the same singer to me.
Interesting. I wonder if he like isn't singing. Maybe he turned that over to a different singer. I'd have to look it up.
No, I think it's the same guy.
Is it the same?
Yeah. It doesn't sound quite as Anthrax-ish as it does like more like a European sounding metal band. There's like a difference a little bit in those sounds. And it sounded more leaning into like the European metal sound.
Okay. Interesting. Well, you mentioned that, this coming out in 89. I don't know. Was Roadrunner Records, I know it was a bigger record label later, because it seemed like it got into the new metal stuff at some point. I feel like, was that a label that you guys looked to in the 80s as like, we're going to find cool bands on this? Like, because there are metal labels that, especially with thrash, like, what was the metal label that put out like early Metallica, the New Jersey label?
Megaforce.
Like, you're getting what you're getting with Megaforce, essentially. Was Roadrunner that way? Because I don't really remember them being mentioned as far as.
I don't know.
So they had.
I'm checking out what they had.
They released King Diamond stuff, Annihilator, Obituary, Sepultura. And that was a little bit, I was not 100% into thrash at that. I mean, I was the bands that you mentioned at the beginning, Tim. I was into Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Testament. And I didn't dig a whole lot deeper than that when it came to thrash metal. So I did buy a King Diamond cassette for the mystery of who this guy was and the makeup and the creepy vocals. And but outside of that, like to your question though, I almost think Roadrunner was a label that like I probably would have stayed away from, because it wasn't a major label of stuff that I was listening to at the time. I probably knew that as like, oh, that's the thrash stuff. Like, I'm not sure that I'm gonna listen to that stuff.
And they're the label that signed Slipknot and put out Slipknot records. Also the label. So when I forgot about this, they're the metal label, and they put out the Sheila Divine's first record. Let's get to our overall ratings on this record, gentlemen. Worthy album, better EP, decent single. Jay, where do you land?
I'm going to go with a worthy album. I think, for thrash, it seems to distinguish itself. It's got some soft spots for me, but it's also very listenable, as I think you guys have said, in terms of, it's a fun roller coaster ride that you want to get back in line again and go on it again. I think a lot of that has to do with the vocals. I think double down on what Chip said. I think if he sang in a more obnoxious or intense way that approaches the intensity of the guitars, it would be too much. I like the contrast of like, it's a tough sounding vocal. It's not that far from Testament or Metallica for me. But it lets the guitars and the drums be intense, and it just sort of like plugs in the melodies enough to keep you going. So yeah, I'm gonna worthy album. Where you at, Chip?
Same thing, worthy album. I was telling Vadim, friend of the show and sometime guest and active in the Discord. I got to hang out with him a little bit this past weekend, and I was talking about how we were going to be reviewing this record, and I told him that I saw the album for $32 at the record store, and this is not something that I want to own on vinyl. And maybe it's a nostalgia sake, maybe it's because I listen to this kind of stuff on cassette in my car. Like stuff that I own on vinyl, I want it to have, like, I want it to sink into the grooves. I want it to be like a 70s album, like an
Parliament
Allman Brothers
Funkadelic
album. Yeah, or like Steely, like this is a, like if I see this on a CD for $5, I'll buy it. If I see it on vinyl for 20 or $30, I'm not going to buy it. But I love it. We're the album 100%.
You want to listen to this on a dubbed Memorex, what you're saying.
What?
Or maybe a nice high, like what were those, like metal tapes?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the nicer cassettes you could get that had like some kind of, they were made of metal or something. It would be one of those.
Yeah.
With any of those bands that we've mentioned on the other side, any Testament and Anthrax and Metallica, Slayer, any of those bands on side B would be an awesome double-sided cassette.
Yeah. Well,
all right, Tim, you hated this?
No, come on. We're the album. And I just want to say, woo! We're the album all across the board.
Not only, like, again,
doing a victory lap.
None of us knowing this album coming into it, and 3 worthy albums. That's impressive.
It is. It also speaks to why this podcast is important, because although we will talk about records that people might be, familiar with in passing, we've done a few of those, or names, there is a lot of stuff like this that none of us have heard of, and it's going to take just accidentally finding things and going, oh, well, this is interesting. And this was a happy accident. So I'm glad it worked out, because this could have gone terribly wrong. Like you said, that album cover does not necessarily give you an idea of what this is going to be. It could have been like bad elfin music or something. You have no idea what's coming with this thing. So I'm glad it worked out. I feel good. I'm going to head into this week with positive vibes that I've put some good out there, and maybe some people will discover Paradox and stream them or pick up their records. I looked in on Discogs. They did put out a cassette in '89 in the US, and if you want to get a copy of it, it's $18. That's what it's going for. Unless you want to get the Indonesian version, which will that's going to cost you around the same, but you'll have to get it shipped from Indonesia, so shipping will be a lot more. But if I don't, I agree. I don't know that I pick it up on vinyl, but if I see a CD out there, I'm definitely going to grab it, because it's definitely a CD or a cassette worthy record. So thanks, guys, for indulging my thrash exploration. Appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing it to us.
And then are we going to do the poll next, or Chip's pick? What's the decision here?
I think we should do the poll next.
Okay. You're holding it off on us. You don't want to unleash your pick upon us yet?
Well, I think the poll winner, do we say what it is, or do we keep people in suspense?
Yeah,
we can say.
Yeah.
It's what Spread Eagle one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're getting ready to go on tour. They'll be coming to Columbus in August, and so I'd love to talk about one of my favorite bands ever before they go on tour, to maybe help sell an additional ticket or two as they cross these United States of America.
So the poll winner could have been your pick had it not won. Yeah.
I mean, I think I may have submitted it at one point, or maybe I submitted their second album for vote. So I'm glad that it won. And I'll share my story about my black eye at a Spread Eagle concert on that episode.
Oh, I can't wait. Chip gets punched.
We need a photo.
Yeah, I assume there's a photo, right?
There's no, that was pre-cell phones. This was 1991 or 92 or something like that.
Yeah, but you got a lot of photos.
You take millions of pictures. Oh my God.
Yeah. It also,
you have more than I do. I have 0.
It involves a lot of drinking too.
Well, yes, that's what usually happens. There's imbibing, and then there's punching. That's how it goes. Well, thanks, guys. We'll be back. We will look forward to that. We want to remind folks that they can join the Metal Union by going to dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com to get all the metal albums that we have discussed throughout this year. It's also where the box newsletter lives at Substack, which is a release calendar of new releases, 80s, 90s, aughts, relevant music, books, TV shows, documentaries, all that kind of stuff. I, by the way, found a website today while I was doing some research called CGCM Rock Radio. This thing looks like it's out of 1996. Like if you looked at the website, you're like, wow, that is a terrible. It's called CGCM Rock Radio. Not the best logo, not the best graphics, but they have a release calendar that, if it is any way metal adjacent, it is on this release calendar. The release calendar is like over 140 pages of releases going back a long time. And I found out about a new Ron Keel album that's coming out, a new Sweet albums that's coming out, just a ton of records that will be coming out over the next couple of months. New Striper, Paul Di'Anno from Iron Maiden, he's got a new solo record coming out. Chris, what's his name? The drummer from AC/DC, who's not Chris Slade. He's got a new solo album coming out. All thanks to this amazing rock radio.
Hey, that
website.
one was in our newsletter today. Come on.
Yeah, that's where I found. Yeah,
I gotta get you guys on a couple of mailing lists that I'm on.
yes,
where
you
you would know about these records as well, and you might even have the Keel in your inbox.
Oh, I thought Ron lived in Ohio, but I think he lives out in South Dakota now or something.
Yeah,
because he
became a cowboy.
Oh, he did.
I legitimately, I have a link to stream the album in my inbox, and I think I read through it, and it's like he's got like 3 or 4 bands.
Yes,
and I think it's called Keel World, maybe is the name of the record.
Keel World, and
there's like 2 or 3 songs from each of those bands on this record.
Yeah, he had a band called, what was it? Steeler was one of his bands, and he had Keel, and then he had one called like Iron Horse or something.
Yeah,
like that.
He was in Black Sabbath for a hot moment,
and they do a Black Sabbath cover on the album, covering all his bases.
Yep.
On that, there's a new Metal Church live album coming out. There's so much stuff that is relevant to this podcast. Want to also mention that you can suggest albums for the polls for this podcast and for our 90s podcast by going to digmeoutpodcast.com, submit an album page, and you can drop it right into there. List the album, list the band, give us some notes on why you're submitting it, and we will talk about that record. And lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback for our show. So for Jay and Chip, I'm Tim, and we'll be back next time with another episode of Dig Me Out 80s Metal.